Buenos dias amigos, I'm coming to you today from Cholula, which is in the state of Puebla. Now, Puebla is famous for its mole, and that's exactly what I've ordered for breakfast here. So we've got some enchiladas mexicanas with two types of mole. We've got the pipián verde, which is like a green mole, which is made with pureed greens such as peppers and jalapenos. And then this one here is the most traditional, most famous one, the signature sauce of Puebla. And it's made with a ton of ingredients, but the main ones are cacao, onions, almonds, roasted nuts, loads of things. So I'm going to eat this and then we'll get cracking with the video, because the video is actually on a historical event which took place, and it's one of, well, it's probably the worst atrocity which was committed by Cortés and his men during the conquest of the Aztecs. This is the mole poblano. Really good, very sweet, very almondy. Tastes a little bit like a pasanda, but it's creamier, it's thicker, and I just love it. So good. Okay, so that's breakfast done. Let's crack on with the history. And I want to backtrack a couple of millennia prior to the arrival of the Spanish to around 800 BC, when this city was founded by the Olmecs. You remember those guys, the Olmecs? They're the ones that created those huge colossal heads in La Venta, Tabasco. And so they created an important commercial city from between 800 BC through to 100 BC. And this city grew in importance even more sort of 500 to 600 years later, when Teotihuacan rose to prominence, because this sat on the trading route between Teotihuacan and Monte Alban, Monte Alban being the famous and huge site down in Oaxaca. And a lot of Cholula's trading and commercial traditions have remained until today. We're in the Zócalo, in the city centre, so we've got a market just in front of me, which is, I guess, fairly geared to tourists, but there are plenty of other markets in the city centre, which actually don't use cash. They just trade good for good, which is obviously how they used to do it in the old days. So what we've got behind me is the #1 attraction in Cholula, and no, I'm not talking about the church, I'm talking about the huge mound that it sits on top of. So buried beneath this mound is the largest pyramid in the world, not in terms of height, but in terms of its volume. So they say that the pyramid is 450 by 450 meters at its base, and you can actually see a little bit of it just here. I'll just get over the fence. But what we can see here is just the first phase of it. So the pyramid was built in 4 phases, and basically as the city grew in size and significance, the pyramid was added to. And so, you know, the pyramid was built across a period of around 1,000 years, and it became a hugely important religious ceremonial center for the region. You know, at its peak, this city came to be the second largest in Mesoamerica, behind Teotihuacan. It had a population of around 100,000, and people from all over the area would come here for religious ceremonies. But when the Spanish arrived, they built on top of the pyramids, the temples, and the existing religious monuments. They replaced them with churches, which is probably why this city has so many churches. I mean, it's got as many churches as London's got pret-a-manger's. But it wasn't actually the Spaniards' fault as to why this huge pyramid is now buried under earth in grassland. What happened is that the city declined in importance around about the same time as Teotihuacan did, and it was largely abandoned. However, in the sort of 10th century, a Mayan tribe then moved into the city, and they used the pyramid. But in the 12th century, or 13th century rather, they were invaded by Nahuatl-speaking tribes, and also people from the declining Tula city, so that's the Toltecs. They invaded, and once they took over the city, this no longer had importance to them, and so they sort of left it to be abandoned. And over a period of time, the earth and grassland and vegetation covered it. So by the time the Spanish arrived in 1519, this was basically largely covered. So we've just reached the church at the top of the pyramid, and although we can't see the pyramid, you can get a sense of just how huge and impressive it would have been by the fact that we've got this amazing view here of the city. So just over there where the trees are, that's the city centre. So that's right next to the Zocalo where I was earlier. I was having breakfast just over there. And then here where this yellow church is, that's a convent. And then down here where this concrete square is, that's another marketplace. So we're right in the heart of the city here, and yeah, we've got some amazing views. So behind me is another view of the pyramid, and as I said before, by 1519 when the Spanish arrived, the pyramid is no longer visible. It's buried underground, and the city is also at that point part of the Aztec Empire. But there is a city just to the north of here which is not part of the Aztec Empire. They have rebelled against the Aztecs, and that's a city called Tlaxcala. So they got fed up. They were sick and tired of paying tribute and providing men to the empire for them to be sacrificed. And their cacique, their chief, stood up and said, look guys, we're not going to be a vassal state of the Aztecs anymore. We're not going to be one of their satellite cities. We're going to stand up and we're going to fight for our independence. And it's a bit of a shame because over here, or over there in the distance, there's a mountain range, but you can't see it today because of the cloud cover. I could see it a couple of days ago, but it rained yesterday and it's a bit hazy today. But I'm going to tell you the story behind how the mountain range came to be the shape that it is, and I mean, you guys can just look it up on Google and see for yourselves. Okay, so the Tlaxcalan chief's greatest warrior is a guy called Popocatépetl, who we're going to call Popo for short in this video, as I don't fancy my chances of getting his name right every time. So Popo was in love with the chief's daughter Itzaquihuatl. Again, I'm not even sure if that's how you pronounce her name, so we're going to call her Itza. Popo approached Itza's father, the chief, and says, look, I'm going to go to war for you, win you lots of battles, and win our people's freedom. And if I do that, when I return, I would like to marry your daughter. So naturally the chief says, yeah, fine, sounds like a pretty good deal to me. So off goes Popo to war, and he goes on the rampage, doesn't he? Winning battles here and there, driven on by his desire to get back to his beloved Itza and marry her. But while he's doing all this, another Tlaxcalan who wants to be with Itza goes to her and tells her that Popo has died in battle. Now she's heartbroken, quite literally, because she dies a couple of days later from the grief. And when Popo returns from battle and finds out that she's died, he is then beside himself with grief and doesn't know what to do himself. He doesn't want to live anymore, and he is wandering the streets for days aimlessly. Eventually Popo decides to honour her by building her a tomb and placing her body on top of it. He then kneels beside her and holds a torch while he watches over her. And as time passes by, as time goes on, the earth and snow cover over their bodies to eventually form the volcanoes that we have today. So if you go on Google, you'll see that we've got two volcanoes next to each other. One is in the form of a reclining woman, and the other is in the form of a kneeling man. And so there's a space between the two mountains, which is called the Paso de Cortés, or Cortes's Pass. And it gets its name because after the Spaniards were in Cholula, they passed in between these two mountains on their way through to Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital. So let's now get on to what the Spaniards got up to when they were here in Cholula. So just before Cholula, they were in the city of Tlaxcala, where they fought a fierce battle against the Tlaxcalans and they defeated them. So after this point, they got the allegiance, they got their alliance, and the Tlaxcalans said, look, we will help you to defeat the Aztecs. And so they then escorted the Spaniards down here to Cholula, but because they had a fierce rivalry with the people here of Cholula who were under the rule of the Aztecs, they weren't allowed to enter the city. So it was just the Spaniards that entered the city on their own. And the Spaniards don't get a great welcome from the Cholulans. When they arrive, the local leaders are very reluctant to meet with them, and after a couple of days, they stop providing the Spanish with food. The Spaniards then get wind of rumours that the locals are planning an ambush, an attack on them, which is confirmed in Cortés's mind when Malinche, which is, as we know, his local interpreter, she hands over a woman from the Cholulans to Cortés. So this local woman has told Malinche that an attack is imminent, so she should therefore flee immediately, and then after it's over she can come back and marry one of her sons. But rather than do that, Malinche turns her over to Cortés, who interrogates her, and he then decides that preemptive action is needed. So on the day that the Spanish are due to leave, Cortés asks to meet with the main caciques, the main chiefs of Cholula. He says to them, I want to see you in the main courtyard, the main plaza of the city, because I want to say goodbye to you all. But once they are all gathered there, Cortés then says to them, well, actually, I've got you all here because I know that you've had plans to attack and kill us, and this goes against the laws of the King of Spain. So, this is treachery, this is treason, it can't go unpunished. And he then gives the signal for his men to start firing on the crowd. So, in this crowd, we've got noblemen, we've got priests, we've got caciques. All the important people of the city are there in that one area, and they're all pretty much unarmed. So in the chaos that ensues, they're all running around, they're getting shot down, they're trampling over each other, they're killing, they're getting crushed as they try to escape. And at the same time, you've also got the Tlaxcalans that have been camped on the edge of the city. So the ones that escorted Cortés and his men to Cholula, they then enter the city and they start firing on the unarmed people. So after a couple of hours, you've got a few thousand people dead in the city. This attack would have been totally unexpected by the local chiefs. There was a kind of code of honor, code of ethics that went with war between the indigenous people. So if you were going to go and attack another indigenous tribe, you would have to give them warning, you would have to give them notice before doing so. And you also only attack during certain times of the year. So you would wait until certain times of the calendar when the gods would be on your side. So this is one of the greatest tragedies or atrocities that the Spanish committed during their conquest of the Aztecs. It's also very similar of the way in which they attacked and massacred the Incas at Cajamarca when they ventured down into South America and what is modern day Peru. But we're getting to the end of this video now, so I'm intrigued. I want to find out what the music is that's going on over there. So I'm going to head over here, get myself a pulque, and then check out the music. So I've got myself a pulque drink. It's made from the juice of the agave plant and it's alcoholic. It's normally about 6%. This one tastes quite weak though, which I'm not that upset about. It's still got a bit of a taste to it. But anyway, in the next video we'll talk about what happens when the Spanish get to Tenochtitlan. But until then, hasta luego amigos.